because I like art and I like books, and I also can't think of a better name, so just bear with me. In this video, I will be talking about the Son of Neptune and racial representation. This will be the first of a type of video I want to post a lot of in the future, so it's kind of like taking a broader issue and talking about it through books. And it's actually inspired by a project I did for my English class. The project is called a cultural criticism, and what we do is that we take something that we don't like about society and we just write a 6-page paper roasting it. And one of the options was we can roast it using a book. And obviously I ended up using The Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan, and I roasted the racial representation in The Son of Neptune. So I'm not actually roasting the whole book. I want to make this really clear. I actually really appreciate this book's existence. That's why I own it. I'm only roasting the racial representation in this book. So if you're interested, just continue listening, reading, continue watching this video. If you're not, go away, I don't like you anyways. The Son of Neptune is the second book in the Heroes of Olympus series, which is kind of like the sequel series to the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. And if you are like still watching this video, you probably already know what this is, so I'll just skip the intro stuff. So for 10-year-old me, the Percy Jackson books were my favorite things in the world. I liked it for the normal reasons. Yes, it was funny, it was exciting, I loved the characters, it had an interesting plot for like a children's book. It was great. But what I really loved about it is the part about dyslexia. I came to the United States when I was 7 years old, and until 4th grade I did not finish a single book. Even worse than not reading a book in like an entirety of 2 years, I actually couldn't really speak or read English. That's not normal. And reading the Percy Jackson books, it was the first time I had heard about dyslexia, and that was the first time I realized maybe I have this problem. It was really the first book that connected to me as a reader when I came to America. It was the first English book I'd ever read, and to this day I think I would not have overcome my dyslexia without the Percy Jackson books. Rick Riordan actually wrote the Percy Jackson books for his then 9-year-old son Haley, who suffered so much from dyslexia and ADHD that he would go home and cry under the table after school's over. Indeed, during an interview, Rick Riordan himself said, "I get an enormous number of emails and letters from families who have children who are dyslexic. One of my favorites is a young girl who wrote to me and said that she used to be ashamed she had dyslexia, but now she has read the Percy Jackson books. She wears that as a badge of honor." As one would say in AP Lang, Rick Riordan both had credibility, ethos, as well as purpose, exigence, in writing the Percy Jackson books. This used to be a research paper. As of December 24th, 2017, the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series has been on the New York Times best-selling list for, wait for it, 457 weeks. That is longer than the Magic Treehouse series, that's longer than the Captain Underpants series, and that's even longer than Harry Potter, which everyone likes Harry Potter. It's longer than that. It's more popular than the Harry Potter. And 457 weeks, to give an idea, is if you see the typical high school freshman today, the Percy Jackson books has been on that New York Times list before these freshmen knew how to read. So if you're still here, you're probably wondering, wasn't I supposed to roast Rick Riordan on racial representation? Why am I like spending so much time on the Percy Jackson series? Because where the Percy Jackson books went right for writing for dyslexic children is also where books such as The Son of Neptune went wrong. In the Percy Jackson books, Rick Riordan represented a very underrepresented group of kids in children's literature, dyslexic children. According to the Dyslexic Center of Utah, as many as 1 in 5 kids are dyslexic. I'm betting not 1 in 5 books are about kids who are dyslexic. So now, before you go run off saying we need more dyslexic kids in books, because actually we do, let me tell you why that would be a bad thing. And this comes with The Son of Neptune, racial representation in books. You see, other than dyslexic children, there are also lots of other types of underrepresented kids in books. And I'm talking about minorities. According to the Cooperative Children's Book Center, out of the 3,200 books that were issued in 2015, less than 15% of them contain minorities. And if you're still watching this video by this point, you're either super bored or a Percy Jackson fan. And if you're a Percy Jackson fan, you know that in Riordan's more recent books, he added lots of minority characters. And In the beginning, I thought that was a good thing. You know, representation, teaching others about cultures, what could go wrong? For me, as a Chinese American, I cannot speak for any other minorities Rick Riordan piled onto his newer books, but I can speak for the character Frank John in this Son of Neptune. So, yep, Frank is 4th generation Chinese Canadian. Representation, yay! Nope. Riordan kept his usual charm with characters when he described Frank, who's like this awkward yet kind of cute character that kind of have to like deal with self-confidence issues, but is also Chinese. More and more, Frank turned from this nice character into someone who's just Chinese. And let me tell you what's wrong with that. I can see that as an author, Riordan's probably like, oh yay, cultural representation, let's love everyone. Frank, frankly, is not the way to do it. Pardon me for the bad pun, that's a really bad pun. The thing was, if Riordan didn't pile on the Chinese thing, Frank could have been a great character. Frank, being Chinese Canadian, is just like every other person, and should be respected like one, period. What Riordan actually wrote in The Son of Neptune is a version of being Chinese that I personally, as a Chinese person, could not relate to. So maybe I'm just salty because I'm dyslexic, but you know how demigods are supposed to be dyslexic because they're hardwired to read ancient Greek, and that's pretty cool and stuff, and that's probably why Riordan wrote the book for his son in the first place. Why is Frank the only not dyslexic character? And also, you know how when they went to Frank's room, Riordan described his room as filled with spelling bee posters? What's saying 16-year-old keep spelling bee posters in their room? This shamelessly plays into the Asians are smart stereotype that just turned Frank from this nice, awkward person into the typical Asian person. And in an attempt to say, oh look, Chinese culture is cool, as if that needs to be backed up, as if Chinese culture isn't cool to begin with, Riordan had the nerve to make things up about Chinese culture to make it interesting. Riordan's not so much promoting Chinese culture, but degrading it. I'm talking about Frank's last name. Also like Frank's entire family history, and also half of everything remotely Chinese that Riordan added on as like part of Frank's character. Let's just focus on Frank's last name, John, or John in Chinese. So John is one of the most popular last names in China. In The Son of Neptune, Riordan explicitly translated John as Master of Bows. Look, I am Chinese, I speak Chinese, I write Chinese. I have friends whose last name is John, and I'd never heard of that translation before in my life. Let's see what happens if you enter the word John in Google Translate. Do you see anything that looks like Master of Bows? Nope. The only thing that makes John remotely Master of Bows is the fact that the character to the, so my right, your left, means bow when written by itself. But that's like saying the last name Brown means Master of Rowing because B-R-O-W-N, R-O-W, row A. It doesn't work that way. Yes, you can say Riordan did try. There was this whole part where Frank talked about like the racist kids in Frank's school who bullied him about fortune cookies, and then Riordan explained that fortune cookies aren't Chinese. Look, I went to a school where I was one of 3 Chinese people in the entire school. And never once had I been bullied about fortune cookies. You know what I was bullied about? I was bullied for being unable to read despite being Chinese, because aren't all Asians smart? Remember Frank's spelling bee awards? This means that not only did the Son of Neptune fail to represent Chinese culture, it also kind of built stereotypes. Riordan wrote what he thought the Chinese culture is like, not what it actually is. And remember how Riordan mentioned that Frank was 4th generation Chinese Canadian? That basically means Frank is Canadian. Most American people are 4th generation something or other too. How come Riordan didn't talk about like your French ancestral background, or the German ancestral background, or the English ancestral background? Why did he focus on the Chinese family history? Piling on all of the Chinese stuff on a 4th generation Chinese Canadian is not including Chinese people. It's isolating us from the society. Do you honestly think 4th generation Chinese people still know all of the tiny things about Chinese culture. In the end, Riordan exploited the fact that most of his readers probably don't have the background in Chinese culture that I do. And his book became not much of a cultural acceptance book, but a stereotype-based cultural charade. But remember when I said I love the Percy Jackson books? What I want to make clear is that I love representation in books. I like learning about how others see the world, how their cultures are like, how books with minorities or other underrepresented people can get you to see the world in a way that you would otherwise be unable to. But what Riordan did in The Son of Neptune is not representing the perspectives of these people. I would have no qualms about Riordan writing about a Chinese Canadian if he actually did research on what it's like being Chinese Canadian, or if he hadn't written it from the perspective of a middle-aged white man whose perspective on Chinese is more stereotype than experience. It would be fine if Riordan just wrote about Frank as a person who happens to be Chinese. You know, Chinese people are people, that's a thing. Not a character whose point is being Chinese. Whatever Riordan thinks that means. Having read The Son of Neptune countless times, I own the book, I understand that without the Chinese thing, Frank is actually a really decent character. Frank can be Chinese, but he can also be a person. Having a Chinese person as a main character doesn't mean there has to be references to China everywhere in the book. If you do want to put references to China everywhere, don't make those references up. The end. Hey, if you're still here, you know what you should do? You should totally subscribe so I can feel better about myself. Hey.